always have a mistake put into the Torah to show men's imperfection. It would be arrogant for a Hebrew scribe to ever try to say, this is perfect. There's only God who creates something perfect.
Well, see, that's a really good, I'm glad you brought that up.
Pardon?
I'm glad you brought that up. I think that's a really good point.
Just a sin of arrogance.
Because, see, the Muslims believe that the Qur'an is the divine word of God, and therefore they believe that to put a mistake in it would be of the greatest transgression. In other words, that it is a sacred trust. And in fact, the Qur'an says that we gave this trust, we offered this trust to the heavens, to the earth, and to the mountains, and they refused to bear it. But the human being bore it. Now it's interesting, because according to the Qur'an, the Jews and the Christians said, بِمَسْتُحْفِظُوا, ask themselves of protecting their books, and they fell short. That's what the Quranic version is. But then it says about the Qur'an, because it's the final one, there would be no prophet after the prophet, to clarify that there were mistakes, it says that God alone has taken it upon God, the divine, to protect this book. So the Muslims actually believe that it is divinely protected for that very reason. And I'm really glad you brought up that point, because I think it's a very pertinent point.
I just added a postscript to that, because when Arabs do their carpet work, they make a deliberate mistake in it.
Right.
So that's a similar thing.
A carpet with a mistake is worth a lot more than a carpet that's made by a machine in Belgium. Anything else?
I'm curious, how many people approximately know the entire Quran?
I would say it's probably, if not in the hundreds of thousands, I would say it's, it would be hard to estimate. But I'll give you an example. When I was in Mauritania, the tribe that I stayed with, and there's several thousand of them, none of the men do not know the Quran by heart. Every single, it's like a prerequisite for that tribe. The tribe that man's from, they all memorize the Quran. And the women, some of them memorize the entire Quran, most of them memorize at least like a third. So they're really, it's very, you can go, if you go to Mecca, it's very interesting. When you're at Mecca, there's 1 million people there. And I feel sorry for the imam, because he's got a microphone. If he makes a mistake, right? He'll make a mistake, boom! You just hear voices from all over breaking in and correcting him. From everywhere, really. And it's actually, it's not encouraged to do that. You're supposed to give the imam a break and let him correct himself. But people are so overzealous. It's like a neat mistake. Made a mistake, and it's an interesting phenomenon. And at my mosque where I pray, there's about 7 or 8 that are huffaz, which is in America. So that's a small number. But if you go to Pakistan, filled with people that memorize the Quran. West Africa, filled with people. Egypt, filled with people that memorize the Quran. Many in Syria, many women in Syria. There's been a recent phenomenon of women memorizing the Quran in Syria. Many women. Turkey. All over the Muslim world you have, and many of the best Quran reciters are not Arabs. Right? In fact, some of the best are Malaysian women.
I'm sorry to bob up again.
You keep doing this.
But it's the practical note. You see, I don't know the Quran by heart. When I'm working on my work, if I need to know something, I ring up the bookshop in London, and I just say to the girl on the desk, can you just have a shout, is there a Hafiz in the shop? And she would say, is anybody here who memorised the entire Quran? And the customer will say, yes, I know. They'll come to the phone and ask.
Yeah, it's very common. It really is. It's very common. If you're in a mosque praying, you'll at least have 1 or 2 that memorize the entire Quran, and many that memorize large portions of it. And it is the book that has created literacy in the world. It's, if you go to countries where they say that people are illiterate, the vast majority of people traditionally in the Muslim world could read and recite the Quran and many could understand it because Arabic was like the lingua franca. It was the Latin of the Muslim world. It's the sacred language.
You mentioned last night that your teacher that has memorized it was like the 7th version of...
There's 7 variants. Now, I'm glad you mentioned that. There's because I forgot to mention that. There are 7 variants which are dialectical. In other words, some of the Arabs could not pronounce the Prophet's language. And so the Qur'an was revealed in different variants based on the different tribes. And they're all accepted. There's 7 of them. And it's a hadith that's written. It does not change the meaning. By consensus, you will find no doctrinal change in the Qur'an. For instance, I learned according to Imam Warsh, who's the African reciter. And there are other people who recite, the vast majority of Muslims recite by Asim or Hafs, who's originally from Kufa. If they hear me reciting and they're ignorant, they might think I'm making mistakes. You see, they might think, but if they're educated, they'll know right away he's reading a sound variant. So, just to give you an example, if I said in Surah Al-Fatiha, I would say, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen, ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. In Hafs, Maliki Yawmiddin. Now, Maliki means the possessor of the Day of Judgment. Maliki means the king. So the meaning is not changed. They're both...
Maybe you should write that word and they can see.
Well, yeah, just the difference here. It's the same root. And the difference would be in the house, there's just a mark right there. Maliki. And in the Warsh, Maliki, like that. So there's only a few differences like that. The others will be more in pronunciation. So it's time for the...
More into prayer.